to talk to the suspect at all? Any idea about motive?
The suspect invoked his rights not to speak to us.
The stepson of a sheriff's deputy, who police say is the Florida State shooter, is not talking to law enforcement. But we have learned a lot about Phoenix Ikner, including that allegedly was not always his name.
We're good.
Oh my gosh. What the hell?
Police say this week he killed 2 people and injured several others on the FSU campus. And just wait until I show you what classmates are saying about him. Why one says they're reportedly not surprised that this is the man who had allegedly become a school shooter. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. There is a lot to update you on the Florida State campus shooting investigation. First off, here's a picture of the suspect. Police say he opened fire near the student union on the Tallahassee campus just before noon on Thursday. His name is Phoenix Ikner. He is a 20-year-old FSU student and, in a shocking twist, the stepson of one of the Leon County Sheriff's deputies.
The shooter is 20-year-old Phoenix Ikner, and he's the son of a Leon County Sheriff deputy. Our Deputy Ikner, has been with the Leon County Sheriff's Office for over 18 years. She has a tremendous job that she's done. Her service to this community has been exceptional. Unfortunately, her son had access to one of her weapons, and that was one of the weapons that was found at the scene. And we will continue that investigation into how that weapon was used and what other weapons perhaps he may have had access to. The alleged shooter was also a long-standing member of the Leon County Sheriff's Office Citizen Advisory or Youth Advisory Council.
Here's his name on an LCSO press release from 2021 announcing members of a youth advisory council. That's described as a group that's supposed to be like a bridge between the law enforcement agency and young people in the community. This is allegedly a picture of Phoenix's stepmom. She has served nearly 20 years as a Leon County deputy. Last year in March, she was named an employee of the month, but the sheriff says it was one of her guns used in the attack allegedly by her stepson.
This weapon was a weapon that the deputy previously used. A lot of times, many agencies, mine included, when we transition to a new handgun, the officers are allowed to purchase the handgun they used prior. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sheriff, but I believe that's the case here. This was a handgun that deputy used prior to them transitioning to a new handgun, and so it was her personal handgun.
Is she put on leave or?
The sheriff would have to speak to that.
Phoenix is currently in the hospital. Police say when they confronted him, he wouldn't put his weapons down, so they shot him. As we said at the top, he's not cooperating with law enforcement, so at the time of this recording, he has not told them his alleged motive for this attack. But we went through dozens of pages of court documents, and we were able to learn a good amount about Phoenix Ikner's childhood, his family, and a custody battle that went on for years. We found in Leon County court records this image of Phoenix Ikner's biological mom. Her name is Anne Marie Erickson. This image was included in a document related to a 2020 probation violation related to her conviction of removing a minor from the state, which I'll talk about in a moment. This is a 2015 lawsuit that was filed by Phoenix's biological mom. Her name is Anne Marie Erickson. We went through those pages of court documents, and they detail a tumultuous divorce and custody battle involving the alleged shooter when they were young. The other name listed as a plaintiff you see there is Christian Gunnar Erickson. It's been reported that the alleged shooter changed his name to Phoenix Ikner from Christian in 2020, That way he has a name associated with his biological dad's family, Christopher Ikner, who is married to the LCSO deputy that the sheriff named in the news conference yesterday. The shooter's biological mom claimed in the lawsuit that Phoenix was the victim of psychological and emotional abuse from the time that he was 11 years old. That suit demanded damages that would go into a college fund for the minor who would grow up to become the FSU school shooting suspect named Phoenix Ikner. According to Leon County court records, this case was eventually dismissed, but we also found this document that was filed in Leon County that shows in 2016 the shooter's mom was convicted of a felony charge of removing a minor from the state and failure to return a minor. Erickson spent 30 days in prison. She was put on 2 years probation. We found Erickson's Facebook page and she posted this on that page back in 2023, quote, "Love being my son, Christian Gunner, parentheses, Phoenix mother." As far as who Phoenix Ikner was in the care on his dad's side, we see posts like this one on social media of him and other members of his family. And here's a graduation picture from high school that a family member still had public on Facebook. Phoenix's social media accounts were quickly taken down within minutes of the announcement this week of his arrest by the sheriff. This is what his Instagram profile looked like before it was deleted. The bio lists a Bible verse, Jeremiah 51:20, which reads, "You are my war club, my weapon for battle. With you I shatter nations. With you I destroy kingdoms." That is a verse that points to the consequences of people who go against God's will. Now, on the surface, someone who is the stepson of a longtime sheriff's deputy who was winning awards for Employee of the Month, someone who is active on a youth council that's supposed to be a leader in the community, it may seem like an unlikely person who would be accused of a deadly college campus shooting. But people who spent time with Ikner in class say it is very much the opposite. Many have said he reportedly had far-right and racist views. He would talk about conspiracy theories in class. USA Today talked to a classmate who said Ikner made it clear that he had guns. And the student went on to say, quote, "It's so sad and so shocking. Then to see it was him, I'm sadly not surprised." Ikner was reportedly quoted in an FSU student newspaper article in January of this year ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration in response to a campus protest against the then incoming president. He said, quote, "These people, the protesters against Trump, are usually pretty entertaining, usually not for good reasons. I think it's a little too late. He's already going to be inaugurated on January 20th, and there's not really much you can do unless you outright revolt, and I don't think anyone wants that." As this investigation is just getting started, we are starting to learn about the victims in this attack. This is 57-year-old Robert Morales. According to his LinkedIn, he worked in dining services at Florida State. His brother announced his death in a post on X. He wrote that Morales loved Florida State, his wife, and his daughter. According to the Miami Herald, Morales was the son of a Cuban-American CIA operative. This is a picture of Morales and his dad, according to his brother in that post on X. Neither of the people who lost their lives in yesterday's attack were students at FSU, but the sheriff said in the news conference that 5 people who were injured were still in the hospital, and there was one person who was also injured, but they were injured running away from the gunfire. Classes at Florida State are canceled through the rest of the week. Several buildings, including the student union, are closed off. They are active crime scenes. Here's a campus map that shows you where that student union's located on the north side of campus. Florida State is a massive state school. It's got roughly 45,000 students. Many of them were put into lockdown yesterday for multiple hours as police responded. Here's what one student saw and posted on social media.
I was on Okay. Just get into it. Okay.
FSU police are responding. Remain alert.
You're not going to be able to get through that camera.
You're not going to be able to get it. You're going to have to go into
You also have to think of the parents and the horror that they lived through yesterday, waiting to hear from their students that they were okay. Here's what one mom said on TikTok.
I just got off the phone with my daughter, who was barricaded behind a door in the Department of Psychology building at FSU for 2 hours. Her and like 50 classmates were let out by the SWAT team. And I have no idea. I have so many text messages and DMs and calls. I have no idea how many shooters there were. I have no idea how many victims. I'm just so overabundantly grateful that she's okay. And just praying so hard for any parent whose child isn't. I'm so sorry.
Florida State is scheduled to hold a vigil on Friday to honor the lives that were lost and the impact that this shooting is having on their community. Along with classes being canceled for the week, Florida State has canceled their home sporting events through the weekend. Joining us now to talk more about the investigation is former NYPD crime scene investigator and co-host of Crime Time with Duty, Ron Ed Wallace. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thank you for being here. We've learned a good amount of information at this point about the suspect in this shooting. What stands out to you at this point?
Well, we need to do a whole lot of background investigations on the shooter. Okay, we have to establish his online presence, his social media presence, his electronic forensics need to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb. We have to understand his history of possible mental illness and any medications that he may have been on. Obviously, the shotgun. We have to do a background check on the shotgun. Whose shotgun was it? Did he purchase it? Is it his? We know that the handgun that he used was his mom's, and she was a deputy sheriff. And so apparently it wasn't secured enough for him not to have access to it. I'd like to know what triggered him, okay, to do this horrific crime. Then we have the crime scene itself. It appears that he rolled up on scene in some kind of orange SUV, and according to witness statements, he exited the vehicle with the shotgun, and he couldn't get the shotgun to work. Ran back to the car and got the handgun, left the shotgun, and came back and started shooting. Now, 2 of our fatalities are not students at the university, and the others are. So a lot of this should be on film. There should be a lot of video and closed circuit TV security footage of the outside of these areas at the student union. So hopefully we'll have a lot of footage to look at. But again, we go back to the beginning. We need to do a deep dive into the week leading up to this and to see what his social media activity was, who he's talking to, any online posts, anything that he may have said or done online that may suggest that this was coming.
I noticed on his social media yesterday, because I was watching the news conference, and it was within probably 15 minutes where the sheriff announced his name. And if you searched Phoenix Ikner, it was on Instagram and Twitter. He was there, and then the social media presence erased, and it was gone. His profiles were no longer on those platforms. If someone were to delete them, maybe the social media companies took those profiles down. From a law enforcement standpoint, how do you go through? Are you able to get information from those platforms if the profiles are no longer public?
Yes, you should be able to get some history here. You go to the judge, you get a subpoena signed or a court order signed by the judge, and then serve it upon the social media companies, and they should be able to hand over everything that they have on file in the cloud and so forth for these accounts.
And when you look at classmates who have said he had what they perceived as extremist views when it came to several issues, how, I guess, who do you talk to as not only just the social media presence, but who else are you going to talk to as you try to put together a picture? Because he's not talking to police. So you're trying to figure out what could have motivated him to do something like this. And if you don't hear from him, how do you go about trying to get to what the motive could be?
So law enforcement needs to put out public messages that anybody who has been in contact with this individual and may have information concerning his motives, his beliefs that may have led to this attack, please contact us. We got to get that information out nationwide and possibly even internationally, as we've seen in other cases that you and I worked on with an international nexus.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just a shocking development is that his stepmom is a Leon County Sheriff's deputy. She's been a sheriff's deputy for 18 years. The sheriff spoke highly of her at this news conference yesterday. I'm sure she is in shock, as many parents are when they find out that their child has been accused of something like this. What's it like when you have to go and interview someone who is a member of law enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, in my career, I've had several cases involving crime scene investigations and either active or retired law enforcement. And it's very difficult, especially when it is apparent that there was criminality on the part of these law enforcement officials. And it's very difficult. You can sympathize to a certain degree, but in the end, she was responsible for safeguarding those weapons. Now, my wife and I are both retired New York City police detectives, first grade detectives, and we raised our family while we were detectives. And we've always safeguarded and secured our firearms. And then when the kids were old enough, we trained them on the safe handling and the use of firearms, but they never had access to our firearms. Never in the entire 20 years of our career, plus, because my wife continued in law enforcement for 21 years with the NYPD, and then another 18 years after that with the district attorney's office. Then my oldest son became a police officer as well. So we never allowed the kids any access whatsoever to our firearms. They were always secured when we were home.
Part of that I find interesting is that I think of previous school shootings where someone had access to a firearm that wasn't locked up and they were able to use that weapon in a high school shooting. Phoenix Ikner's 20 years old, so he's not a minor. Could the stepmom still face charges where maybe she did have, if she did have the gun legally locked up and this was someone who is not a minor and is eventually able to get access to the weapon? I mean, how could the law look at how he was able to get to the gun, and how does his age factor into what, if any, trouble that the stepmom could be in?
Well, if in fact he broke into the mom's storage locker for the firearms, say a safe or a strong box or whatever the case may be, and he's an adult, so he committed a crime to gain access to that firearm, then the mother should face no penalties for that. If she did that, then she made attempts to secure her firearm and keep it from access from her child, and then he broke the law to gain access to it. And then he'll be charged as an adult because he's 20 years old.
The sheriff said, invoked his right not to cooperate with the investigation. What type of communication, once he puts that, he says, I want a lawyer, I'm not talking. what type of communication can law enforcement have with him going forward? Is there even just checking in to see if he still has that approach to the investigation, or is it something where you just have to wait for him through a lawyer to contact you?
Well, you can reach out to his lawyer, but you cannot reach out to him directly now. Once the lawyer is involved, all direct communications with this defendant ceases to exist. Any communications between law enforcement will have to go directly to his lawyer, and then from his lawyer transmitted to the defendant, and then all these decisions will be made between the defendant and his lawyer.
I know in previous cases we've talked about, and you've lived it in your career, just the methodical approach that a crime scene investigator needs to take in putting together a timeline and the evidence that could be used when you get to a trial. And this would be a very high profile trial when we get to that point. There are, at the time of this recording, roughly 8 buildings that are closed on the FSU campus, which is, if anybody's ever been, it is a massive state school. What type of, with school and those parts of campus closed off, I mean, how do you approach a massive crime scene like that and make sure you have the evidence you would need for trial?
Well, as I said, by the time the crime scene people get notified to respond, there should be plenty of information about what transpired and where it transpired, where the different shootings occurred, the movements of the suspect and the victims. All of that should be obtained relatively easily in this case, because in this situation, in these universities and the way our society is today, you can't walk around any place or drive any place without being videotaped. Okay, or photographed. So there should be plenty of that information. But as you said, this could be quite an extensive crime scene because of the movements from the parked car back to campus, and then back to the parked car, and then around the campus conducting the attack, and then being confronted by law enforcement, and finally shot by law enforcement and stopped. So all of these areas of concern have to be looked at. In addition, you know how many rounds were fired. You know how many gunshots the victims have sustained. So you're going to have to account for all this ballistics. You're going to look up for all the cartridge casings, and you got to understand too, in the beginning stages of the shooting, the people on campus, whether they go to school there or not, are running around like chickens without a head through the crime scene, trying to protect themselves and save themselves. So, these potential cartridge cases being ejected from this firearm are being kicked all over the place, and or moved or crushed or damaged, possibly altered. I hope that's not the case, but in reality, that is highly probable. And then you have to account for all of that. So, you get the information from the 2 decedents, how many gunshot wounds they have, whether they're perforating or penetrating, meaning if it's perforating, it means the bullet did not exit and is still in the body and should be found on x-ray of the bodies. And if it's penetrating means that the bullet stayed in. Perforating means it entered and exit. So if there are entrance and exits, then you have to look for those bullets. And that could be a daunting task in and of itself, because bullets can fly miles, so you have to track down everything as reasonably as possible.
And classes are canceled through the rest of this week. Sporting events that were going to be held in Tallahassee, those have been canceled through the weekend. Is that enough time for crime scene investigators to gather as much evidence as they can before the school will eventually need to start bringing students back onto campus as they continue the semester?
It should be. Now we're into day 2 now of the crime scene, right? So it started yesterday, and we're into day 2. So after today, they should know if they're missing any ballistics. All right, they have the firearm. They should know how many cartridge cases. They should know the magazine and how much capacity it could hold. They would know if there were any magazine changes. Did he expend one magazine full of ammunition and then reload with a new magazine? They should know all this information. Now, they again have to add up the shots with the wounds of our victims and make sure they can account for that. Now, if they don't line up, then they have to look for what's called ballistic impact marks on surfaces of buildings, vehicles, anything that was in the vicinity that could have sustained ballistic damage from a bullet that missed its target.
What do the days look like for a crime scene investigator when you are working up against knowing that on Monday next week, the school could be back to business as usual? It's a campus of 45,000 people. For one crime scene investigator, what do those days look like?
Well, if it's just one, it's going to be a long time.
Well, I'm sure it'd be a long time, but I guess for one person working on, part of the team that's trying to piece things together.
Right. So if the crime scene of this magnitude, it can be broken down into more manageable sectors. You don't have to have one team of crime scene investigators process the whole scene. If it's this large, then what you could do is you break it down into more manageable, you grid it off and break it down into more manageable sections, and then you assign multiple crime scene teams to process those individual sectors.
And when you look at, and unfortunately, we've covered a lot of cases like this, whether it's a school shooting, whether it's and I know we've talked about Nikita Kasap, who's the young man accused of killing his parents in Wisconsin. And I think especially in the case of a campus shooting, and we see it play out on social media, that people want to know what someone's political beliefs were and kind of make it this conversation that goes into something beyond the case itself. But for you, like as someone who has investigated these cases, you now analyze these cases, if there is something that is consistent through the people who commit these types of acts, what would you say that is?
Well, right away, what jumps at me is mental illness and the medications used to treat mental illness. I see a common theme amongst these shooters with regards to these types of illnesses and medications.
Yeah, and we've dived into Phoenix Ikner's family background. Seemed like there was some significant custody battles that were going on for a long time, and I'm sure we'll learn more about his mental state. Knowing all the information that you could gather from the crime scene and forensics, and then, especially now in a world where on our phones you can learn so much about somebody, if he never cooperates with law enforcement, how strong of a case can you put? Certainly we all want to know what the motive was going to be, but in terms of making sure this person, if they did what they say he did, goes behind bars for the rest of his life, do you really need to talk to him?
You can have cases that are circumstantial evidence based and still get a conviction. So what I've seen in the past is you can do a deep dive on the cell phones, the texting, the movements, all the GPS locations in there, the social media footprint. Then you look at also the vehicle. You could use the infotainment system to see when the phone connects there. There's also data stored in there. Okay, especially with the social media aspects of it too. There's clouds. You gather up all of this information of what was transpiring leading up to the event, and then in this case, he was stopped as he was in the middle of the incident. I shouldn't say event; it's an incident. He was stopped and halted at the incident, and so we don't have any further electronics coming from him at this point. But based upon all of this data, you should be able to look at his Amazon searches or whatever searches he was conducting online, what he was reading online, where he was visiting, what sites, and you should be able to get a profile of who this individual is to probably establish an MO for why he did this.
Yeah, it's so interesting too when you think it's so much more than the Facebook and the Instagram. I know in a lot of cases we talk about Telegram, Discord, unclear if he had profiles on there, but even now the Amazon, I know in the Brian Koberger case out of Idaho, Amazon has become an incredibly key part of defendants in these cases and what people are accused of. So it's going to be, this is of course a story in the very beginning. It's very tragic. It's shocking with the background that this shooter appears to have had. And there's going to be a lot of questions moving forward. Ed Wallace, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We are requesting as much information as we can on this story, including court documents and body cam video. When we get that information, we'll be sure to share it with you. For On the Case, presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.